A police officer cut the trap off a dying lion. What happened next left him frozen. I knew that. Every protocol, every training session, every senior officer who ever mentored me had drilled that into my head. You don't approach an unknown situation alone. You wait, you assess, you call it in. I did none of that. I'd been patrolling the eastern corridor of the reserve for 6 hours straight, the kind of shift that starts before sunrise and bleeds into the kind of afternoon heat that makes the air above the road shimmer like water. I was tired, not the kind of tired that coffee fixes, the kind that settles into your shoulders and stays there. The call had come in through the reserve's ranger frequency, not even my official channel. A herdsman near the fence line had spotted something large and motionless near the acacia grove at kilometer 42. His exact words were, "It's not moving, but it's breathing." That was enough. I'd seen illegal traps before, wire snares mostly, crude, cheap, devastatingly effective. Poachers don't always want the animal dead immediately. Sometimes they want it exhausted, weakened, easier to manage when they return. What I was not prepared for was the size of what was caught in this one. He was lying on his side when I first saw him through the brush. A male lion, full grown, his mane still thick despite everything. Tawny coat, darker across the shoulders, one massive paw twisted at an angle that made my stomach drop. The cable had bitten into the leg just above the joint. Deep, the kind of wound that doesn't announce itself with blood right away. It just compresses, quietly destroying everything beneath the surface. He was breathing. Slow, labored pulls of air that moved his entire ribcage. I stood there for a long moment, just watching. There's a version of this story where I immediately called the veterinary unit, established a perimeter, and waited for the proper team to handle it. That version exists in the report I filed later. It is accurate in most details, but what the report doesn't capture is the 4 minutes I stood alone at the edge of that clearing, watching a 200-pound apex predator struggle to lift his own head, and feeling something I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't pity. I've learned to be careful with that word around animals. They don't want it and they don't need it. It was something closer to recognition. He was caught in something built by human hands, suffering because of a decision a person made. I reached back into the truck for the bolt cutters without thinking. My hands were steady. That surprised me. You don't remember deciding to move. Your legs just carried you forward. The bolt cutters are in your right hand. They weigh more than usual. Or maybe that's just your arms, tight with adrenaline. Every muscle already bracing for something your brain hasn't fully processed yet. You are 4 meters away from a lion. Not a photograph, not a documentary. A living, breathing male, close enough that you can see the individual hairs along his jawline matted with dried saliva. His coat is pale gold in the afternoon light, darkening to amber across the broad shelf of his shoulders. The mane is full, but filthy. Dust and dry grass tangled through it like he's been dragging himself across the earth for hours, maybe longer. His eyes are open. That's the part nobody tells you about, that a wounded animal doesn't always close its eyes. He's watching you, not the way a predator watches prey, calculating distance and timing. Something slower than that, something that doesn't have a clean name. You stop moving. 3 meters now. The cable is visible from here. Steel wire looped just above the left foreleg, twisted so tight the skin around it has swollen into rigid ridges. The paw below hangs wrong. Not broken, you think. But the joint is compressed in a way that joints aren't meant to be compressed. You've trained for dangerous animal encounters. Everyone in rural patrol does. The training says do not approach, maintain distance, wait for wildlife response teams. The training did not account for the fact that the nearest wildlife response team is 90 minutes away, or that the lion's breathing has already started to shallow. You take another step. He shifts, not toward you, just a repositioning of weight, a reflex. His back legs push weakly against the ground and find nothing useful. A low sound comes from his chest. Not a growl. Something beneath a growl. The kind of sound that vibrates in your sternum before it reaches your ears. You exhale slowly through your nose. The bolt cutters go around the cable. Your hands are shaking now, not from fear exactly, but from the specific, fine motor terror of doing a precise thing in an imprecise situation. The cable is under tension. When it snaps, it will recoil. You angle the cutters to redirect the recoil away from the lion's leg, away from your face. You squeeze. The snap is louder than you expected. It echoes off the acacia trees and disappears into the dry air. The lion flinches. You stumble back 2 steps without meaning to. And then, stillness. He doesn't move toward you. He doesn't move at all. The freed leg drops to the ground and stays there, and for a long, suspended moment, the only thing either of you does is breathe. You realize you're still holding the bolt cutters out in front of you like they mean something. You lower them slowly. The lion watches. You watch back. It wasn't loud. Not the way people expect metal to be loud. It was sharp, compressed, the kind of sound that doesn't linger in the air so much as arrive and vanish, leaving something heavier behind in its place. The support team had positioned themselves 40 meters back behind the two vehicles. 3 officers, 1 reserve ranger. None of them moved. The officer crouched near the lion. They would not use his name in the official report, only his badge number. Straightened slowly and took 2 careful steps backward. His eyes stayed on the animal. His hands were still open, the bolt cutters hanging loose at his side as if he'd forgotten he was holding them. The lion did not charge. For 11 seconds, later confirmed by the timestamp on a team member's body camera, neither the man nor the animal moved. The lion's freed leg lay against the dry ground. The wire still coiled loosely around it but no longer anchored. The wound beneath was not visible from 40 meters, but the ranger standing at the rear vehicle would later describe the smell that drifted toward them as something between copper and heat. Old blood, dried and compressed and finally released into the air. The lion raised his head. It was a slow movement, effortful in the way that suggested the neck itself had been carrying weight it wasn't meant to carry for too long. He didn't scan the clearing the way a healthy animal would. He didn't assess the humans, the vehicles, the open bush beyond the tree line. He looked at the officer, directly, steadily, with the kind of focus that doesn't require energy, because it isn't a decision. It's something older than decisions. The officer didn't retreat further. He didn't speak. He stood where he was, and if the camera footage revealed anything in those 11 seconds, it was simply this: a man and a lion, both breathing, both still, in a clearing that had no protocol for what was happening inside it. The ranger radioed the veterinary unit at 419. The team did not approach until the vet arrived 22 minutes later. In that time, the lion did not move from the spot where the cable had held him. He remained on his side, head up, the freed leg extended awkwardly in front of him. He did not sleep. He did not close his eyes. The officer remained at the edge of the clearing for the full 22 minutes. No one on the support team called out to him. No one suggested he return to the vehicles. Later, when asked why he stayed, he gave an answer that didn't appear in the official report either. "I don't know," he said. "It didn't feel right to leave." The veterinary team sedated the lion at 4:41 p.m. The wound required immediate field treatment. The tissue damage was significant, the joint compromised. Recovery, they said, was possible, probable even, but the leg would never be what it was. As the sedative took hold and the lion's head lowered slowly to the ground, the officer finally turned away. The support team would later agree, without discussing it explicitly, that something had occurred in that clearing that none of them had the vocabulary for. They drove back to the station in silence. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, because I kept doing the math. 11 seconds. That's what the body camera showed. 11 seconds of standing in front of an apex predator with nothing between us but open air, and whatever it is that passes between two living things when one of them has just freed the other. I've run that number through my head more times than I can count. 11 seconds is nothing. 11 seconds is the time it takes to pour a cup of coffee, to read a text message, to decide whether to answer a call. But standing there with the smell of blood and dry grass in my nose and 200 pounds of lion watching me from the ground, 11 seconds was long enough to rearrange something I hadn't known was in place. I thought he was going to die. That's what I need to be honest about. When I cut the cable and stepped back, I did not do it believing I had saved him. The wound was too deep. The tissue around the joint had that gray, waxy look that doesn't heal clean. I'd seen it in cattle. I knew what it meant. I cut the cable because leaving it on felt like a decision I couldn't live with. That's the whole truth of it. Not heroism, not instinct, just a very simple refusal to walk away from something that was suffering inside a trap that a person had set. What I was not prepared for, what none of the training, none of the years on patrol, none of the things I'd seen had prepared me for, was the moment he lifted his head and looked at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. There's a difference, and I know how that sounds. I know how it reads on paper. Officers are not supposed to make claims about what animals understand or feel or communicate. We document behavior. We file reports. We use words like appeared to and consistent with and no aggressive response observed. But I was there, and what I observed was not nothing. He was exhausted. He was in pain. He had every biological reason to treat me as a threat. I had made noise, I had approached, I had touched the thing that bound him. And yet, he looked at me the way you look at something you're trying to understand. Not to eat, not to flee from, to understand. I stood there for 22 minutes waiting for the vet. I didn't plan to. I told myself I was maintaining a visual on the animal for safety. That's what I would have written if anyone had asked me to justify it. The real reason was simpler and harder to say out loud. I didn't want him to be alone. By the time the vet arrived and the sedative went in and his head finally lowered to the ground, I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I drove home that evening on roads I've driven 1,000 times. Everything looked the same. Nothing felt like it was. You go back 3 weeks later. You tell yourself it's routine. The reserve ranger clears you for a perimeter check on the eastern corridor. Same stretch of road, same acacia grove, same flat, bone-dry landscape that looks in the early morning like something out of a time before people had names for things. You sign the access log. You drive in alone. You don't tell anyone why you requested this particular sector. The trap site has been cleaned up. The cable is gone. Confiscated as evidence. The ground where he lay still holds a faint depression. You notice it only because you're looking for it. Because you've thought about this patch of earth more times in the past 3 weeks than you've thought about most things in your life. You park and sit in the truck for a while. The bush is quiet in the way that isn't actually quiet. Insects, wind through dry grass. A bird somewhere in the middle distance making a sound like a question with no answer. You watch the tree line. You're not sure what you're hoping to see. Then the ranger's camera report comes back to you. You'd read it twice the week before, in the break room after everyone else had gone home. Motion-activated cameras positioned throughout the reserve. Standard monitoring. Footage reviewed weekly. The report noted, male lion, estimated 6 to 8 years, observed moving through grid sector, 7 east on 3 separate occasions over the past 14 days. Gait irregular, favoring left foreleg. Otherwise healthy presentation. Alive. You sit with that word for a moment. Alive. The vet had said probable. She had not said certain. And for 3 weeks, you'd held that distinction in the back of your mind like something fragile. Not quite hope. Not quite its opposite. Just an open question you weren't ready to close. You step out of the truck. The morning air is cool enough that your breath shows faintly. You walk the perimeter of the clearing slowly. Not because there's anything to find, but because your body needs to be in this place again, to complete something that felt unfinished. Near the far edge of the acacia grove, you notice the tracks. Large, fresh. The front left print is shallower than the others. Less pressure on that leg, the weight shifted to compensate. But the stride is long. The spacing is consistent. He was here this morning. Not an hour ago by the look of the disturbed soil near the tree roots. You stand very still. The bush gives you nothing back. No movement, no sound that doesn't belong. He's gone, moving through territory that was his before the trap, and is his again now, in the diminished, rearranged way that survival always costs something. But he's moving. You look at the track a long time. The imperfect print. The weight shifted. The evidence of damage that healed into something functional if not whole. You think about the cable, the bolt cutters, the 11 seconds. You think about how little you actually did in the end, and how much it turns out that was enough. You drive back to the station without stopping. You don't file a supplemental report. Some things don't belong in a document. The courtroom was small for the weight of what it held. 4 defendants, 12 counts of illegal trapping across 3 protected reserves. Photographs entered into evidence. Wire snares, cable systems. A field journal with grid coordinates written in pencil. The kind of careful, methodical record-keeping that suggested this had been happening for a long time before anyone noticed. The officer sat in the second row of the public gallery. He was off duty. He had not been subpoenaed. He had come because the prosecutor's office had sent a courtesy notice to everyone involved in the original field response, and because, though he wouldn't have said this to anyone, he felt he owed the room his presence. The proceedings were slow in the way legal proceedings always are. Testimony, objection, recess, the language of the courtroom flattening everything into statute and precedent, and the careful avoidance of anything that couldn't be quantified. Then the photographs appeared on the screen. Standard evidentiary display, each image time-stamped, labeled, entered into the record without ceremony. The prosecutor moved through them efficiently, a snare near a water hole, cable rigging along a fence line, close-up of a trap mechanism, ruler included for scale, and then, the lion. It was a field photograph taken by the ranger unit upon arrival, before the officer had approached, before the cable was cut. The lion on his side, the leg caught, the mane spread against the pale ground, shot from a distance slightly overexposed in the afternoon light. The courtroom did not react. Evidence is evidence. The prosecutor moved on within seconds. The officer did not move on. He sat with that image, already gone from the screen, replaced by the next exhibit, and felt something travel through him that he had no clean word for. Not grief, not anger, something that lived in the space between those two things, where most of the important feelings seemed to end up. He had not seen a photograph of the lion before. He had been there. He had seen the animal with his own eyes, had stood close enough to hear the weight of each breath. But a photograph is a different thing. A photograph is what remains when the moment is over and the people have left and the animal has gone back into the bush. It is the proof that something happened, stripped of everything that made it matter. He looked at his hands in his lap, the scar on his left palm, not from the cable, from something years earlier, a fence post on his father's land, caught the fluorescent light in a way it usually didn't. Outside the courthouse 3 months later, 2 of the 4 defendants would receive suspended sentences. The other 2, fines. The reserve would install additional camera systems along the eastern corridor. A memo would circulate about revised response protocols for injured wildlife. None of that is the ending. The ending is this. A motion-activated camera in grid sector 7 East, on an ordinary Tuesday in the dry season, captures 4 minutes and 30 seconds of footage. A male lion walking a ridgeline at dusk. Left foreleg carrying less weight than the right. The gait adjusted, compensated for, absorbed into the body's new understanding of itself. He pauses at the top of the ridge, looks out over the reserve, then moves on into the dark. The footage is reviewed the following Friday. It is logged, dated, and filed. No one flags it as unusual. If that lion could have understood what happened in that clearing, do you think it would have changed anything about how he moved through the world afterward? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments.